always wants to know, can I keep the house? That's the first thing everybody asks.
Yeah. And so the answer is, it depends on a lot of different things. There's a mortgage payment. There is property taxes if there's not a mortgage payment. There are utilities. There is, support isn't going to last forever.
Right.
Maybe you don't have a job. So it's, if I keep it, how am I going to afford it? If I sell it, where am I going to move? Can I get approved for a new mortgage? Or just what's going to happen to the house? If I do keep it, can I refinance and get the mortgage in my name? Or maybe even, hey, maybe you don't even know that. Maybe you just assume that it's going to stay the way it is. And, you get into a divorce and learn, oh no, I need to refinance my house. And I know that, we have, situations where someone thinks they can refinance and then they get divorced and then they learn, hey, I can't refinance. Mm-hmm. And then, now we have to figure out something creative to make it work. And certainly you don't want your ex-husband being your landlord, hounding you for not even rent, but mortgage payments. Mm-hmm. And then you don't want him to be in control and be in control of your credit. And if he stops making the payment, now your credit gets trashed. And so it's definitely a good topic and one to be concerned about, and definitely one to figure out before you get divorced, quickly, before you file for divorce, right after you file for divorce. And it's interesting because there's a lot of creative solutions you might not think about. Mm-hmm. Maybe, instead of taking half of his 401k.
What we've done before finalizing an agreement is go through a detailed budget with the client. Obviously through the discovery process, you have access to every bill that ever has to be paid on the house. But yeah, just going through what needs to be paid. What can you afford? How are you going to sustain or almost sustain the same lifestyle that you've had during the marriage, and make sure that you can still do those special things for your kids and for yourself. Mm-hmm. So I mean, walking into it and kind of knowing what you're trying to do financially post-divorce is very important. And you can engage in some of those talks with different financial institutions before your agreement is finalized regarding,
or even us. And so
right. Well, I mean, that's something that we do. I say you, like the client's doing it. I mean, they're not doing it. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
To see if they can afford it and what options the bank has to provide them with maybe some extra cash.
And I think it's important that again, preferably before you file for divorce, but if not, quickly after.
Yes.
To figure out what your budget living together was, figure out what your budget is going to be once you're separated, but then also, getting a realistic picture of what all your assets are, because then you can be creative in the solution. Maybe there isn't a need for a mortgage payment, or maybe keep that and do something different. Because, whether you were the primary income earner or you were, staying at home, either of those categories, you might not know what your total picture looks like. You're just out there making money. If you're the one earning it, maybe you're not keeping track of it. If you're the one not earning it, maybe you never knew. And when you sit down to get divorced, it's the first time you've looked at everything. Yeah. And so the fear of, can I keep the house, might be one that you shouldn't even have, because there's a lot of options to take care of it. And mm-hmm. so.
And I think a second aspect of can I keep the house that is important to consider when we're talking about, do we want to keep it or do we want to sell it, is that you are entitled to half the equity in the house. You are entitled to that if it's sold, or if you want to keep it, you have to be able to provide half the equity that's in the home to your husband. So when you're saying, hey, can I afford this mortgage? The other aspect is, can I also afford to pay husband out half the mortgage? And that is where kind of the creative solutions come in. We're saying, hey, maybe I owe him, $10,000 to keep the whole home. I don't have that. What am I going to do? And so that's when we start to look at, what are the other assets? Are there $10,000 somewhere else that I can give him, like out of a retirement account? Or does he owe me $10,000 somewhere that he can just keep? So that is piggybacking off of what you said about getting a good idea of what the finances are. That kind of helps us all figure out where we could be creative to help you reach your goal in keeping the house, or a little bit of extra cash in the event that you do want to sell.
And I think the one thing that's always fun, and it's not just the house, but any asset, when you're talking about, buying your spouse out of the house, you have to buy the spouse out of anything you keep. Because half of it is, it's all 50-50, despite what he thinks that it's all his, but it's all 50-50. And so you have to buy the other person out of it, and you're buying it out with your own asset. So it creates this really, sometimes fun situation when people want to assign emotional value to something where maybe it's worth more than the equity to somebody.
Yeah.
And it's always fun to get into the bidding wars of when they say, oh, there's only that house is only going to sell for 300 grand. So there's only 60 in equity. And you're like, okay, I'll buy it for 60. And you kind of call them out on their number. They're like, oh, no. You know what? I think it's 350 now. Now you're buying it at a 110 or whatever. You get into these bidding wars, sometimes in front of a judge, and you can see the judge smiling that you just pulled this move on them, which is calling them out for undervaluing something. Or, we have the situations where a spouse will think, hey, I'm for sure getting this. And so they really, really want it to be worth less because then they're trying to buy out of a smaller number. And then the tides start turning and it's like, oh no, like she's going to end up getting this, and now they're stuck with this low number, and you've tricked them into into getting the house for pennies on the dollar. And so there's always it's you get to know the full financial picture so that you have options and leverage and ability to quickly move in the middle of a trial or in the middle of a negotiation, because you know the number, you know what your highest number is, you know what you want it for, and you know what you don't want it for, and letting us be the unemotional buffer in between so that they can't see, this painting or this car or whatever has emotional value creates fun opportunities to, screw with your husband, basically.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge too that over this process, you might change your mind. Maybe you don't want the house because you guys bought that house together and your mother-in-law did this with you, and you don't want to walk past your little breakfast nook every morning and think about him eating his Wheaties or whatever it is that he eats. So, you want to have the freedom to decide, I want the house, and this is what I'm going to do to negotiate in order to be able to afford to buy him out and afford it in the future. But you also want to know, what you can get for it if you end up deciding that you don't want it. So we can be there to help you make these major financial and emotional decisions.